Welcome back to another loose nut printing video. In this video, we're going to be getting Klipper up and running the simple way. So, stay tuned and enjoy. Okay, so the first thing in the process of installing Kiauh is going to be needing to get the Raspberry Pi imager. I already have it installed. If you don't have it, you can easily get it from the Raspberry Pi site. So, with having it, just simply continue on by selecting your device type. It doesn't matter which board you have, it processes all the same. I'm going to be using a Raspberry Pi 3 for this instance. Next thing we're going to be needing is the Raspberry Pi OS, and all we need is the legacy 32-bit, and then we just tell it where we want to install it. Then the next thing we're going to be doing is giving our Pi a name and password. That's going to allow us to SSH into our Raspberry Pi. And then the next thing we got to do is set up our Wi-Fi name and password. Once you have that set up in there, we can simply save it and tell it, yes, we want to use these settings. And if you have anything on your SD card already, it will just ask you if you want to overwrite, and just tell it simply, yep, overwrite, and it will start writing the firmware to the SD card. And once it's written to the SD card, we can continue on. Now with the process done writing to the SD card, we can tell it to eject the SD card from the computer, and we can now simply take that SD card and plop it into our Raspberry Pi. Now with the SD cards extracted from the computer, we can plop it into the Raspberry Pi's SD card slot. One thing I will mention, make sure to have your main board unplugged from the Raspberry Pi before you power it on. So with that all said, we can just now simply plug the Pi in. And if you do have handy a HDMI screen, you can use it to see what the Raspberry Pi is doing. It will take a minute or so for the display to show any information on what the Raspberry Pi is doing. You don't need it. You can just go off the green LED on the board itself. And once it's done doing the install, it will stop blinking. But if you have the screen, you'll see this line on the bottom. And then, like I said, the light will be off. With this step done, we can now move on. Now with the Raspberry Pi OS installed and ready to use, we can simply SSH into it by opening up Windows PowerShell. You don't need any other program. So the way we SSH into a Raspberry Pi is by using the username that we gave it, and then the IP address it's been assigned by your router. And the easiest way to find out the IP address of the Raspberry Pi is just going into your router and looking at the settings. You can easily Google that and find out how to get in there. It's not that hard. And then the password is just the same password we set in the settings. Now we're in talking to the Raspberry Pi via SSH. So now we can simply start getting a few things we need to get before getting Kiauh. So the first thing we're going to be needing to get is the GitHub utility for Linux. And that's just simply this line here of code that will be in the description, along with the Kiauh GitHub page link for the steps on installation. And that will get us all the things that we need for that. And it will take a few seconds for it to complete. And once it's completed, now we can actually move on to getting Kiauh. And that's just simply this command line, what also will be in the description. And this will actually grab Kiauh and get it ready for us. And this will just take a few seconds here to install or get. And now with that we can start Kiauh and get Klipper installed. Now there's Kiauh's main menu. So since we want to be installing some of these things, we just simply need to hit 1 and start getting all of our items we want installed. So the first one we're going to be needing to install, obviously, is Klipper, the firmware itself. So we just simply tell kiauh.1, and it's going to ask us if we want to do the legacy or recommended, and obviously it's best to do the recommended. So we hit 1 and number of Klipper installs. So if you're doing multiple printer setups for Klipper, you would change this number to however many printers you're setting up. Since I'm doing 1, I'm just going to leave it like that and tell it to start downloading and installing Klipper. As easy as that. And there we go. Klipper is successfully installed. Now it's asking if we want to add the username that we created at the beginning, and we just tell it yep. And the next thing we're going to need is Moonraker, and just asking if we want to truly install it, and we're like, yes, we do. Moonraker is the API to be able to talk to Klipper. It is the go-between of the whole process. So you have Klipper, Moonraker, and then whatever web interface you're going to choose. You have Fluid, Mainsail, or Octoprint. And for this example, I'm going to be using Mainsail. You can use both of them if you want, but there is a little process of doing that. You'll have to change the port number on whatever one you install secondly. So like I said, I'm just going to be simply using Moonraker for this install, but the process is the same thing for Fluid. So just click on 3, enter, and it will start doing the install for you. Very quick and easy with Kiauh. Not that complicated compared to what the process would have been like. And now here it's asking if we want to add the macros for Mainsail, and of course we do. So we just simply tell it yes, and it will grab them, and there we go. Now we have the critical 3 parts for Klipper to be used, and essentially we could now go use it. But I'm going to be adding one more thing onto my install, since I want to be able to try to use that. It's going to be Crow's Nest, and Crow's Nest is to allow you to use a webcam with your Klipper install. The others here I haven't fully looked into yet, but some of the features are detection if there's issue with your print. There's mobile detection or mobile alert if through your phone and stuff. So I'm not all too sure about those. I have to still go in depth, but here I'm just simply installing Crow's Nest, since I want to be able to monitor my prints via webcam. So simply going to let this go, and it will take a little bit, but overall it's pretty quick and painless install. And there we go. Crow's Nest is done installing, and it's asking if we wanted to update the config for Moonraker, and of course we do. So now with all that done, we're done installing Klipper and all its accessories. We can now move on to getting the printer config. And with the printer config, the nice thing with Klipper is they have already pre-configured printer configs for just straight boards and printers. So all depends on your printer or mainboard determines what printer config you're going to be needing. Unfortunately, the mainboard I'm going to be using wasn't in there, but luckily enough, MakerBase actually had a config for this board, so that was real bonus. The only thing we're going to have to do in our config is change the MCU number. It might be correct in the printer config for your board or printer. Mine was, but I'm going to show you how to obtain the MCU serial number, and that is very simple. So I had to restart my Klipper install since I installed Crow's Nest, so I'm just simply going to re-SSH into my Klipper install, or my Raspberry Pi I should say, just by using the printer name and password. and starting up kiauh just with the same line of code that we used to start up the first time. Now with kiauh reopened, we're going to be going into the advanced section and then hitting 5 to get the MCU. Make sure the main board's plugged in and turned on and plugged into the Raspberry Pi. If you have that all good, you'll be able to get your MCU number like that. You can see that mine is the exact same thing as it is in the printer config already, so don't have to change anything there. So I just simply close that, and we're pretty much done with the SSH side of things with kiauh. We still got a couple of more things to do, but for now we're just simply going to get our printer config uploaded to Klipper through our Mainsail, I should say. But the first thing we're going to have to do is rename this file to printer.config. If we don't do that, Klipper will not see the file. So now with it renamed, we can go over to Mainsail and simply upload our printer config. So just simply hitting upload, clicking on the file, and there. Now our file is in. Our MCU still won't be able, our Klipper won't be able to talk to the mainboard just yet due to the fact we haven't flashed the mainboard with Klipper yet. I just refreshed to see if anything would change, just making sure that everything was working, and it looks like we're good to go. So now with the printer config done, last thing we need to do is actually tell the firmware what we're working with. So we hit 2 to go into the build menu, and in here we're going to tell it that we're working with an apt-get chipset, and it's a apt-get 2560. If yours is different, change it to what the corresponding chipset and processor model is. And once that's all done, all we hit is Q, and once that happens, it will start compiling the firmware for the chipset and processor that you chose. Now once that is all done, we can simply flash it to the MCU by just telling it with 3 and then entering. And now it's going to ask us if we want a regular flash or update via SD card. Regular flash is what we're going to be using. If you're using a 32 or STIM32 board like a Big Tree Tech E3 Mini, you'd use the SD. So since we're using US regular method, we're going to go tell it make a normal flash 1, and now here we're telling it to talk via the USB, and next thing is it's going to ask for which MCU we're going to be using. If you had multiples here, you would choose which one it is. Since I only have one, I'm going to type 1. It knows that we selected which MCU, and we can simply now continue with our process, and it will now flash Klipper to our MCU. Now with that happening, we have essentially installed Klipper on our Raspberry Pi and our MCU. And now you see Moonraker refresh up in the corner and show an error. That was kind of self-induced due to the fact not realizing the pin layout was already proper in the printer config. I changed them. I changed them back to what the company had them as, and all the errors went away. So self-induced, simple fix. But that's it, guys, for this episode. Thank you for watching. Have a good one. Rate, comment, and subscribe. And see you back here next Monday for another video.